I wrote the Indus Saga and the making of Pakistan, mainly, in fact, entirely, while I was serving prison terms under Ziaul Haq, General Muhammad Ziaul Haq and his martial law. What really made me write the book was the question that continued to arise in my mind as to whether Pakistan was an artificial creation. Had it been, was it something that Radcliffe had drawn on a piece of paper and a line he had drawn, and that line had become Pakistan on one side and India on the other? Did it have its roots only in the 1940 Pakistan resolution? Did it go deeper to 1857 when there was an uprising against the British and the Imperial Army, Imperial state? What were the reasons that, and why was Pakistani different from the others? After all, we wear the same dress as Hindus in India, 15 miles from where I sit, just 15 miles, only 15 miles, and we speak the same language. Some of them, they may not eat meat or particularly beef, but in every other respect, our cuisine, the yogurt that we eat, the spices that we eat, the way we cook the rice and pilau, the way we make aloo gosht, particularly for those who eat gosht, but can be mutton. The poetry that we write, the great literature that we have produced, Quratul Ain, Aag Ka Darya, Manto's short stories, Iqbal and Ghalib and Faiz, Faraz, Parveen Shakir. These names are loved just 15 miles from here. They are loved. They read them and they try to understand them. They write on them. They analyze them. They are doing PhDs on Parveen Shakir and Faraz. None here is doing that. We don't bother about our great writers and poets, and I don't know of a single university, at least I don't know, which is doing a PhD on Faiz. Iqbal is, yes, Iqbaliyat. Iqbal is in fact the ideology of Pakistan, so you will find 90 PhDs out of 100 on Iqbal, and the rest, the remaining 10 on Islamiyat. But in India, they are doing these, they are working on these. So we were so similar, but at the same time, we became two countries. So we were not that similar also. So what was the difference between the Indus person and the Indian? And I came to the conclusion that more than any dogma, more than a set of beliefs, it is often geographical topology or barriers, physical barriers, which make for different civilizations. Mountains, for instance. Had there been no Himalayas between India and China, they might have been a very similar kind of people, gradually changing into the yellow from the brown. But that gradualness may not have been noticed. If it had been flat land and no Himalaya. Now, if the Indus rivers and the Indus and its 5 tributaries, the Beas, the Satluj, the Ravi, the Chenab and Jhelum, and then Indus, had they flowed to some other direction, or had they flowed into the Gangetic basin and been a part of the Ganges and Jamna delta and Brahmaputra, they might have been the same. But rivers flowing in one direction sire and sustain. They sire and sustain different civilizations to rivers flowing in the other direction. It is like when you go to the hills, you find these sloping roofs because they want the snow to not to burden the roof and to slide off. Now these sloping roofs, if 2 drops fall close to each other, but on different sides of the slope, they'll end up going miles away from each other. So although the Indus and the Ganges, they have their source, particularly the easternmost branch of the 5 Indus rivers, the Satluj, and the Ganges, they have the source from the same body of water. It's like the drops falling close to each other. But they drain one into the Arabian Sea and the other into the Bay of Bengal, about almost 2,000 miles apart. So they will naturally give birth and sustain and maintain different civilizations. And rivers are, in fact, are those critical factors also. Now I began to think on this because that was a time when everybody was writing as if Pakistan was very fragile. Tariq Ali wrote his book, The Death of a State, at that time, and he was a great influence on us, on my generation. He was my generation, but he was a very great influence on us. Shahid Javed Barki wrote a book saying, virtually Will Pakistan Survive, which was the title of another book by another Larry Lifshultz or some, probably. And these created a paranoia in us. And particularly when I was in jail and spending long terms there, I used to wonder, look out of the prison bars, stare out of them vacantly, and wonder whether Pakistan was a solid state. And then I began to reach out for books, which my wife Bushra would bring from outside to the jail. Everybody, prisoner was allowed 2 books per fortnight, and I was allowed 2. But I would take these K2 cigarette packets, distribute them among the prisoners, and get them to thumb mark my applications for books. So the books came through other prisoners, but they came to me to read. Books came from, for instance, Variam, son of Muhammaddin, wanted to read, and he had thumb marked the application, wanted to read Bashams, the wonder that was ancient India. At the same time, another prisoner had given me the permission to bring into the prison Midnight's Children by Lapierre and Collins. So all kinds I had about 500 books in my shelf at one time. or in my cell. But I'm not a historian. But I began to read history. I began to devote myself to this question. Are we different? And I came to the conclusion that yes, we were, and we were primordially different. We were similar too. Our similarity should make us more confident and more aware of ourselves. We are so similar to the Indians. And our differences should make us again more confident and be able to identify ourselves. We have Central Asian influences of the Turks, of the Afghans. We have Persian influences of the great civilization of Persia. We have Central Asian, deep Central Asian influences in our civilization, like the Mongols and the Mughals. Their descendants have built some of the most beautiful monuments on the face of the earth in India, like the Taj Mahal. But we were different. We were different in the sense that there are, of course, some differences that are being exploited these days in India, especially on cow slaughter, for instance. That is the wrong way to look at it, and the negative way to look at it. But the positive way to look at it is that if we had Ghalib, they had Kalidasa. If we had Bulle Shah, they had Kabir, Bhagat Kabir. And they gelled together. They were the same. But we were under no fear of being run over. We had a beautiful civilization in between us. The civilization of Guru Nanak and the Gurus and the Sikhs. The amazing civilization where people come out and do seva. Like no other civilization on earth. The way the Sikhs, they recently started holding these oxygen langars. The Sikhs all over the world, and particularly in India, when India started running out of oxygen. So we are a medley of civilizations bound together, and yet different and separate. And the Indus saga is that the Indus produced its own civilization, which took out the best from the Persian, the Turk, the Afghan, the Kazakh, the Central Asian, deep Central Asian, the Indian, the Hyderabadi, the Deccan, the Punjabi, the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, the Baloch, the Sindhi, the Kashmiri, and a whole lot of others. And what made Indus distinct was that everything gelled in it. And in this book, it's an episodal history. It's not I think at least it's not a dry history. It's a history with which people have liked. It's gone through, as you can see, some 30 editions, and people want to read this history, which we don't teach them. We don't teach our children. The history books that Ziaul Haq manufactured were history books. For instance, the history of Pakistan. The first chapter was Mohenjo-daro and Harappa. You can't avoid that because it's on your banknotes also. So you can't avoid that chapter. Second chapter of the history of Pakistan that his wise men suggested was Saudi Arabia before the advent of Islam. Chapter 3 was the message of Islam. Chapter 4 was resistance to the message of Islam in Mecca. Chapter 5 was the migration of the Muslims to Medina. Chapter 6 was the Medinite state, the Rashida, Khilafat-e Rashida or Khilafat-e Medina that the Prime Minister keeps talking about. The seventh chapter was the conquest of Mecca. And then in time, the history of Pakistan, this is the history of Pakistan I'm talking about. History of Pakistan goes with the Umayyads to Damascus and returns to Pakistan in 711 with Muhammad bin Qasim. And our textbook writers were teaching to teach our children had left out a history from virtually the dark ages of Saudi Arabia to 711, the history of Pakistan, from Pakistan. They had left it out completely. And there was no mention of that, no mention of the Guptas, no mention of the Ashokas, no mention of the Kushans, no mention of the Scythians, the Sistanis, no mention of the Huns, no mention of the Bactrians who came with Alexander. But then this mention starts again with Muhammad bin Qasim as a Muslim, and then of 200 years later of Mahmud Ghazni, then the slaves dynasty, then the Mughals. But all this period of 1.5 millennia is just not our history. It's not our mothers and fathers who were living there. There was some alien race. We just came with Muhammad bin Qasim and we suddenly became the entire majority population. Now our children ought to know better. They ought to be knowing the truth. They must be told the truth. And I've tried, whether I'm successful or not in this, but I have tried to fill in this Indus history from prehistory, that is from before the Mohenjo-daro and Harappan age, that is from before the arrival, the coming of the waves and tribes of the Aryans, before the Rig Veda, before the Atharveda, and right up to 1947. I couldn't cross 1947 incidentally because no book which dealt with the affairs of Pakistan after 1947 was allowed in the prison. Because it could be seditious, it could be against the army, it could be against the political culture, it could be against the politicians, it could be against the bureaucrats, it could be against the World Bank, it could be against our alliances with America, the CETO, the CENTO alliances. So 1947, the martial law regime said no book after that date. But I was doing research in any case from prehistory to 1947, and in that is where this book is called The Indus Saga and the Making of Pakistan. And in Making Pakistan, I find my workmen, my students, my scholars, my poets. I use poetry as a source, as a primary source of history. I पर इल्म कदा कर मुफ्ती बाग इश्क दे रहन महजूल मियाँ पढ़िया इल्म ना रब दी तम हुंदी इको इश्क हरफ अकूल मियाँ. Now I am reading this from Waris Shah, and how Waris Shah he reflects the society of the Indus region of the time of Waris Shah, which is the 18th century. But I also discuss here the coming of iron and the use of iron tools, and how they created a greater, larger market for the bullock cart, which was now was now running on iron axles, and iron axes could cut the forests more easily. Iron scythes, daranti जिसको कहते हैं, वो would cut the plant without the grain falling off. So it added to man's potential, and when it added to man's potential, it added to his civilization. When it added to his civilization, it added to his means of communication. He had more to talk about. He had more words to create. And that is what we have to teach our children. The story of Pakistan is the story of the Indus. And the Indus, by Indus I mean not only the Indus river alone, but the Indus and its 5 tributaries, the sweet waters of the 5 Punjabi rivers, Beas, Satluj, Ravi, Chenab and Jhelum. Because we tried to keep our history from the children and to feed them specific history, we make one big mistake also. We forget the role of technology. Technology has been the great shaper and mover of history. We forget. We think we lost the 1857 war because the British conspired with our leaders. They took Punjab with them, and they got Punjab to fight the UP. And actually the Brits had the technology. One example only, for instance, the Patriots, that is us, we had taken Delhi in 1857, and the British troops were taking their time coming from the Sindh and Punjab. Napier was coming from Sindh, Nicholson was bringing his troops from Punjab. It was a long distance journey, and the British troops that were attacking and that had attacked Delhi, the Kashmiri Gate, and were under constant fire, were tired. There was cholera, it was summer, there was malaria, there was typhoid, and they were about to give up when they got a telegram from Nicholson that he was 2 marches away. And they consolidated. And together, if the commander outside Delhi had really become frustrated and attacked, he would have lost on day 1, and on the 3rd day Nicholson would have lost. But that telegram gave them the edge. The railways gave them the edge. The new methods of making roads gave them the edge. The new methods of making bridges gave them the edge. It was technology. Thank you. Thank you.